Let's just take a snapshot of a single, pretty pivotal day in our near future. Saturday, February 7th, 2026. The headlines from this one day, all sourced from Trending News Fox, really paint a picture of a world caught between these huge, historic ultimatums on one hand and record-breaking euphoria on the other. It's a world, you could say, on a knife's edge. And right off the bat, the reporting uses this incredibly powerful phrase, a significant reset. Now, that's not just a small change, right? That suggests these foundational shifts in geopolitics and economics and even domestic policy are all happening at once. So what did this reset actually look like on this one particular Saturday? All right, first up, the biggest story of the day, no question. A super high-stakes deadline for the war in Ukraine. After nearly 4 long years of conflict, the U.S. has just stepped in with a really firm demand, and it's effectively starting a 4-month countdown to peace. And you can just see how fast things are escalating right here. The war kicks off in 2022, and now, boom, early 2026, the U.S. imposes this super aggressive new timeline. The very next step is a big summit in Miami with a final peace agreement demanded by June. The clock is officially and very loudly ticking. So the strategy here? It's that classic stick and carrot approach. The U.S. is keeping up its support, but it's also warning of extreme pressure if that June deadline gets missed. The problem is, the core sticking point is the exact same issue that stalled talks for years, Russia's demand for a full withdrawal from Donbass, which, Kyiv has said over and over, is a total non-starter. And we have Ukrainian President Zelensky himself confirming all this pressure. This quote just underscores how this is really an American-led push and highlights the absolute urgency of this new timeline. The demand is for a clear, decisive schedule to end the conflict by the beginning of summer, period. Now, get this. While all those diplomatic tensions were absolutely soaring overseas, the mood on Wall Street, well, it could not have been more different. It was a day of just pure economic celebration, being described as a golden era. What a fascinating contrast to the global pressure cooker, right? And there's the number, 50,000, a historic milestone for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I mean, this is one of those numbers that signifies a huge psychological barrier being completely shattered for investors and the market as a whole. But you gotta ask, what was actually behind this unprecedented rally? Well, it seems to be 3 key factors driving this whole thing. First, a major tech recovery. You had giants like Amazon and Tesla seeing these huge gains as their big AI investments were finally starting to pay off. Second, there was this massive wave of optimism from a new India-US trade deal. And third, the crypto market was finally stabilizing, which gave big institutional investors the confidence to jump back in. And you can see here, the good news was pretty much spread all across the board. The Dow breaks 50,000, pushed by deregulation and trade deals. The S&P 500 had its best day in months, thanks in large part to AI infrastructure spending. And even Bitcoin stabilizing was pulling in more of that big institutional money. It really was a day of green arrows all around. Okay, pivoting away from the markets, let's look at the stories that were hitting a lot closer to home. 2 very different narratives were really capturing America's attention: a high-profile criminal investigation and a couple of major new policy pushes coming out of the White House. The whole country was on day 6 of the search for Nancy Guthrie, who is the mother of NBC host Savannah Guthrie. The FBI had just escalated the whole operation, and according to the reporting, clues from ransom notes were pointing them toward a local suspect. The seizure of a vehicle in a Las Vegas raid was a huge development, all while the family was making this emotional plea for her safe return. Meanwhile, over in Washington, the administration was moving ahead on 2 very different domestic fronts. One was a pretty controversial proposal to add a citizenship question to the 2030 census. The stated goal was to base congressional apportionment on the legal population. And at the same time, a new platform called TrumpRx was launched with Dr. Oz, and its whole aim was to challenge big pharma directly on the cost of prescription drugs. So, beyond the Ukraine ultimatum and the Dow's insane record high, a lot of other events were shaping the day, both globally and culturally. Let's just broaden our lens for a minute and catch some of those other headlines. And man, it was a tense day across several other global flashpoints. Nuclear talks with Iran kicked off in Oman, but with a U.S. admiral sitting at the table, a very clear reminder of the military pressure in that region. In Sudan, just a tragic story, a drone attack by the RSF reportedly killed 24 civilians. And those simmering tensions between India and Pakistan, they flared up again, with India flat out rejecting accusations that it was involved in a bombing. All right, on the lighter side of the news, it was Super Bowl weekend. Super Bowl 60 was all set with the Seahawks getting ready to face the Patriots in San Francisco. And in the world of entertainment, a documentary called Melania had this surprisingly massive opening weekend, pulling in $8 million and becoming the most successful documentary debut in over a decade. So, after covering war deadlines, market highs, and domestic crises, what does this all really add up to? Let's try to distill the key takeaways from this one pretty extraordinary day. Looking back, you can see 4 major themes really emerge from the day. First, geopolitics, defined by that urgent deadline in Ukraine. Second, finance, which was marked by a historic bull market. Third, a domestic security story where it looked like the FBI was really closing in. And finally, a big policy push in healthcare to try and disrupt the entire pharmaceutical industry. And all of that brings us to our final question. When you look at all these headlines together, from the threat of extreme pressure in a war zone to the celebration of a golden era on Wall Street, does this one day actually capture a world that's in the middle of a successful reset? Or does it show us a world that's just teetering on the brink? Definitely something to think about.